I believe in playing the right notes, and sometimes you need 1,000 notes to articulate what you're trying to say, and sometimes you need 3.
Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Belgian Jasper. If this is your first time on the channel, hit subscribe right now. What do you get if you put one of the best singers in progressive metal together with a phenomenal piano player that is also a massive metalhead guitar player, producer, you name it? You get Silent Skies, a project that was actually started when Evergrey singer Tom Englund found Vikram playing piano covers on YouTube. I sat down with Vikram to learn all about the new album Nectar and their plans for the future. All right, well, Vikram, thank you so much for your time today. Exciting times. We're recording this the day before a new video gets released. Yeah. So excited for that. Basically, this is a modern Cinderella story and you're the Disney princess in the story. In a nutshell, you made your own piano rendition of an Evergrey song. Tom got to see that, and then let's snap our fingers. Years later, we're here with a second album. Did I get that correct, or is there something missing in the story?
Yeah, no, that's pretty much how it happened. I've been doing metal rock songs on piano for a long time now. I guess it's been over a decade since I started doing that. And when Tom saw the first video I did of an Evergrey song, which I think was in 2014, the fall of 2014, I guess he saw that there was something in my playing that resonated with him, that I understood the music in a way that maybe other people who cover Evergrey songs, maybe they weren't hitting him in quite the same way. Yeah. That we phrase things similarly. We have a similar sense of like, well, what sounds good to us. I guess he can pick up on all these things just from hearing me play. And I'm very fortunate that he pursued his own inner calling and what he felt compelled to do, to reach out to me completely out of the blue to ask if we should do an album together. And I was like, well, yeah, of course we should do an album. And you know, the rest is history. We haven't slowed down one bit. If anything, we're getting more and more manic with our work to the day. Yeah.
What for you brings, you know, is it similar or is it very different to find that soul of somebody else's song and interpret it in a different way? Or I wouldn't say like create a different soul for it, because it's still the same essence, or writing brand new music? Because it must be also really cool that you realize that, hey, I listened really well and I'm able to channel it in maybe a different way. What is that for you as a composer?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, and something that I think is very important to me. If I'm going to play somebody else's music, I want to honor it in the very best way that I can as a creative person myself. And for me, that means not just saying that the chords are D to C to F, and then you play D to C to F, and the melody goes F, G, A, so you go F, G, A. To me, there's a lot more to it than that. And when I listen to any piece of music, and if I'm going to play it on piano, I have to cultivate a lot deeper and more intimate of an understanding of the music, because there are things that you hear in a metal song that you physically can't do on a piano. You can't do double bass. The piano is a piano, it's not a voice, so you have to emulate the voice in a more effective way than just, plunking the notes down. That's not going to move people the way that a voice does. So there's a little bit of like translation that has to go on. So it's not a one-to-one correspondence between what you hear and then what you play. And in that process of translation, it's like, when classical scholars translate old texts, there's a certain amount of artistry that goes into that, and it's not just a one-to-one, like they said this word, so I'm gonna write this word. There's a certain amount of intellect and creativity that goes into that translation. And it's
Yeah.
kind of the same way when I cover music. I'm a lot more interested in really tapping into what's happening beneath the surface and what's happening emotionally. And I think that's what Tom picked up on, that I was
Yeah.
tapping into what the emotional story of the song was, and not just the notes and the harmonies and stuff. I love when the music that I listen to, you know, as a fan of music, when I perceive that there's something going on in the music that, you know, you can dissect it down to its layers and the theory, and it's brilliant and awe-inspiring. But if you just look at it as, you know, okay, I know what it does. So what does it actually make me feel? What's it conveying in that very intangible way that, you know, the best art has the possibility to move? And I love hearing that as a listener, and I guess I aspire to that in my own music to the degree that I can. And it's a little bit easier in the music like Silent Skies because minimalism is such a big part of it. I think you're not going to alienate people with too many notes. Whereas in other projects I play in, like I have a progressive jazz fusion trio, Lux Terminus, and I could imagine that some of that music, which is very, very, very technical and kind of manic,
Right.
that could conceivably have so much going on theoretically that it could obfuscate the emotion that happens beneath the surface. But for me, I mean, if there's no emotion behind it, it's not worth playing. And, you know, I believe in playing the right notes, and sometimes you need 1,000 notes to articulate what you're trying to say, and sometimes you need 3. I guess, you know, the magic of songwriting and performance is to know when you need 1,000 and when you need 3.
Faint scars on my body.
The lyrics and the music tell a story, but I don't necessarily always perceive it as the same story. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Like, there can be some very deeply dark lyrics being conveyed, but where the music provides, let's say, that you know, light at the end of the tunnel or a glimmer of hope, and that juxtaposition is something that seems to come back a lot in your projects. Is that just me looking at it, or do you agree with that statement?
No, I do agree, and I think, you know, the most honest art is the art that, I guess, by conscious design or just because it happens this way, it ends up being a reflection of who you are and the things that are most important to you. And Tom and I both were people who have dealt with a lot of crap throughout our lives, and we have, you know, a lot of demons that we both struggle with, but we're also both people who try to, you know, live the best, most positive lives we can. And there are things in our lives that we hold really dear, that are really important to us, and, you know, some beautiful parts of our lives as well. So we have both the light and the dark within us, as does everybody, really.
Right.
So then making our music, I mean, I don't really think too concretely about, you know, what element anything I write is a manifestation of, you know, the light side or the dark side or somewhere in between. But I think if you're making music honestly, your music is going to be that way. And I think that's why a lot of the most profoundly honest music has both of these elements. You know, oftentimes the most honest music is very, very dark, but there's usually some kind of glimmer of hope. And, you know, I like I said, I loved it as a listener, I love it as a performer. Being honest and authentic is one of the most, if not the most important thing to me.
Yeah. And you mentioned it, you know, you and Tom dealt with demons. Everybody has light and dark. And I think it's a fair statement that everybody has these elements, but everybody, no matter who you were in the last 2 years, you probably were faced with certain elements more than before in your life, just state of the world. Now, neither Evergrey nor your music necessarily needs a pandemic to write dark or deep music. At the same time, I believe that you worked for over 4 years on the first album. and then now
it
we
took
have
4 years to release it. It took 2 years to write. Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. And the second album now comes much faster. So, was there? When you look back at the work now, do you see an influence of that, or was it we had different amount of time to focus on certain areas, or do you still see that influence of going through these crazy 2 years reflected on the music?
Yeah, I mean, the influence of the pandemic is funny because, on the one hand, it's an awful thing, and especially for Tom, who is a very, very frequently touring musician.
Right.
That's a big part of his life that has been completely on the back burner for a couple of years. So, both artistically and financially and all these things, that's a very particular burden that he has to shoulder. But at the same time, it afforded us time that we've never had before. When we did the first album, Satellites, we had to juggle it with all the different obligations that he and I both had, especially Evergrey released an album in that time frame, and their tours and all this stuff, and so you have to fit in, when are we going to work on Silent Skies? It's important to both of us, but there are only so many hours in the day.
Right.
I felt like our days massively opened up with the pandemic, because we'd wake up every morning and what do? You're not going to go tour. You're not going to travel the world. You might as well write. And so we did so much writing, and the pandemic really was a blessing and a curse in that way, because this album exists and it came together in the speed that it did because of the pandemic. It's because we had so much time and so much energy, because I think if you're a performer, you exhaust a certain amount of energy performing every day, and you leave a big part of yourself out on the stage every time you perform. If you don't have that outlet, then creativity at home is the best thing that you have. So we've done so much music this year. I mean, it's not just the Silent Skies Nectar album. We've started the third album already, and we do video game composition together as well. So I mean, and we did a Redemption album this year too. So it's like it never ends, and it's a very particular luxury of being able to do this during the pandemic, because I know there are a lot of people who can't afford to do that. And so, it's awful if the pandemic has affected you in such a way that you can't, be who you are, authentic to yourself.
I've lost control, 'cause my heart is too old.
One of the things that I always appreciate about Tom singing is that he brings a warmth and a comfort to sometimes the bleakest of lyrics. And that always reminds me of the singing of another artist that brings maybe not always the warmth, but definitely that joy to even some of the bleakest lyrics, and that is Anneke van Giersbergen, that you worked with Lux Terminus.
Yeah.
Do you see those similarities between two very different artists? Because I think that they fit together very nicely.
They do. They're both singers who prioritize storytelling, both literal and emotional, in their vocals, and I don't think that either of them do anything if it doesn't mean something very profoundly to them. And of course that manifests in very different ways, because Anneke has some of the most joyous, celebratory sounding songs in all of rock music, and Tom is not really known for that. But they do have a way of making the darkness accessible through beauty, and I think they show that there is beauty in darkness. And I think that sometimes expressions of darkness can just be so profoundly dark that they lose some of their beauty. But I think if you're going to honestly portray darkness, then representing that beauty is important. And I think that's why there's some very dark music that is very accessible to many, many people. I mean, Adele is not known for being cheerful, but is one of the most successful artists of our time, and I think there's a reason for that.
And it's getting harder.
I know that you've got a ton of different projects, but for Silent Skies, besides another album, like, where would you like to take this? Like, is this something that, should we have our hopes up for maybe certain exclusive live shows at some point? What's your dream?
I think for Tom and I both, we realized really quickly in working on the Satellites album that this was not going to be a one-time thing, because it's not just the outcome, the product, but it's also the process we have together is one that neither of us have really had before, in terms of the kind of creative partner that you can have this kind of beautiful synergistic relationship with, in terms of spreading ideas and creating something greater than yourself. So I mean, we both knew once we were working on the first album that, okay, there are probably going to be many more of these. And so Silent Skies is definitely here to stay. There are going to be a lot of albums. We're looking beyond 3 for sure. And we also really want to play live, because Tom and I are both performers at heart. And we were even talking about playing live before the first album came up. And even when there's no COVID-19, it's hard to coordinate live performances when we're both so busy, you know.
Right.
And in regular seasons, Tom is on the road so much of the year, and I have a busy day job as a producer as well. So we both have our hands full, but we want to make it happen. We got some pretty cool offers that we're mulling over. It's difficult to say now whether we would do tours or one-off shows, and if we did tours, who would we tour with? Because a lot of our biggest influences and kind of musical kindred spirits, they don't really, if they tour, they don't really do opening acts. You know,
Right.
People who are more in the modern classical stream of things. But we want to make it happen. We can't really say what it will look like yet, but it is a dream, and I think either in the near or far future it will come true.
Vikram, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Excited to see the full record, Nectar, be released February 4th. And thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man. It was a pleasure talking to you.
You are awesome for watching this video. Click right here to see more content like it and subscribe to the channel.